Greetings, everybody, and welcome to Heart Speaks to Heart, where we bring to you different stories of various Catholic converts and reverts who either once left or thought of leaving the Catholic Church, but with the grace of God, found their way back home. Ako po si Rods De Leon, co-founder of the Champions of the Rosary Philippines Apostolate, a newly formed Marian Apostolate. Ako po ang inyong host sa programang ito under the Faith Watch YouTube channel of the CBCP Media Office. Kasama po natin ang ating co-host na si Burns Kaasi. Kay Burns, hello!
Hey guys, sup? Burns Okasi here, a former anti-Catholic Protestant and the founder and creator of Unboxing Catholicism. I'm so excited to be with you, no? Mga ka-Faith Watch, mga ka-Heart Speaks to Heart dahil mapapasubok tayo, Rodney, sa full English because of our guest in a short while. But it's a very, very interesting story that we're gonna unbox in a short while. So be sure, no, to like, share, and subscribe to our channel.
Let me now introduce our guest for today. Maybe some of us are familiar with him because he's an actor. He's a Filipino-American Hollywood actor. Artista po siya. And he has starred in many films such as Hardflip, To Save a Life. And most famously, baka familiar po ito sa atin, lalo na sa mga students. It's the film about a spelling bee entitled Akeelah and the Bee, where he played the role of Dylan Chu. He also has a YouTube channel for vlogging where he talks about many things, including faith-related stuff and even dating. So be sure to view his YouTube as well. Baka makarelate tayo. So without further ado, let me now present to you our guest, Sean Michael Afable. Hello, Sean.
Hey guys.
Sean.
Yes.
Hello, Burns. Hello, Rodney. Thank you guys so much for having me on. It's a pleasure. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes, we're
How are you
excited
there?
to be here too.
I'm good. You know, it's after 2:30 in the morning here in Los Angeles, but I mean, when I heard you guys wanted to have me on, I was stoked and I was like, I'll stay up late. It's all good. I usually do this anyway, so no big deal. Let's get at it.
Yay, perfect. Okay, Sean, to begin, before we begin asking you questions and before we begin uncovering or unboxing your story, we would like to start with our usual icebreaker first. Okay, so we're going to be presenting some pictures that we found over the net, the good ones, that is, don't worry.
Don't worry.
Okay.
And once we show it to you, we hope that you could share us anything about that photo. So,
Sure.
So anything about it and share to us, to our viewers, what happened behind the photo, etc. Okay?
Yeah, you got it. You got it.
Yes. Okay. So Burns, please let's show the first photo. What
This
can
is
you
the
say
first
about
photo.
this picture?
Oh yeah. Okay.
So please
That's
share
the
to us.
moment. That's a pivotal moment in my movie Akeelah and the Bee, where my character Dylan is flabbergasted that Akeelah obviously through the word xanthosis, which he knew that she knew how to spell because early in the film he had told her. So there's no way that she couldn't have known that. Why would she do that? He was confused why she would, so they're the last two up there at the National Spelling Bee. Why would somebody make this move? And it was an altruistic move, but why would somebody be that selfless? And it was an amazing moment, I think, because if you see the contrast between the two characters and what she did, and I think this is a beautiful point, because if we think about what we're talking about today, which is our faith and how it impacts us and how we can have a change of heart, you see Dylan impacted by her love and selflessness in that moment. And the interesting thing about that is her altruism in that moment is and her love for Dylan for no reason. He was rude to her and mean to her, and he had an attitude towards her throughout the film, but that one act of goodness made a change in his heart towards her. And
Amazing.
And you can see that split second change. And I think it was beautiful writing by Doug Atchison, our writer and director. And I'll always love that moment. I'm glad I got to be a part of it. And I think it's great for people to see, especially young people, that the single act of kindness can change someone's life. And like Mother Teresa said, though, it's not always the the big things in life. You can't always do great things, but you can always do little things with great love. And that's what life is all about. And that moment is, I think, such an amazing part. You know, what's funny about that too is I never realized how powerful that moment was until just somewhat in the last few years. You know, growing up and being a part of things, you kind of don't have that third eye view, right? You don't have that third party view, I should say. You're kind of in it and you're just kind of doing your thing and you're focused on your acting. But when you get older and you realize the profound things that are inside of art, which is why I think art is so important, it had an impact on me. Looking back on that moment, I didn't even, something I hadn't thought about in years. You know, I was, you know, it was a few years ago when I did the Akeelah and the Bee. As you can see in the movie, I looked pretty young. I was actually 16 and a half, almost 17. I looked like I was about 10 years old, but I was literally driving myself to set. So people think all the time that, you know, I was super young, but I was actually almost 17 in that film. They just made me look that way. But thinking back on that, it was a profound moment for me. So I love that moment. So awesome picture. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up.
Sean, I have a very related question to that. So Rodney said that this is one of your best films. And in fact, you also affirmed it that this was a pivotal moment in your quote-unquote showbiz career. But let's take a step back. You are a Filipino-American. So how did you guys migrate there? I mean, what's the story of your family moving to LA and how did you become an actor?
Absolutely. So my grandparents and my entire mom's side of the family, my mom moved here when she was 16 or 17, and the rest of my family some of them had already been moved here, my aunts and uncles, and then the rest of them came. My grandparents finally came, and so pretty much all my family's here. The first time I actually went to the Philippines, I think I was like 21, so I had never even been until that time, and so yeah, my entire family came here, and my mom, you know, wanted to get my brother into some acting stuff and whatnot. So my brother actually started acting before me, and me being the younger brother, my brother's almost 5 years older than me. Me being the younger brother, I always want to do what my older brother was doing. So I'm like, well, I want to do that. I can do that. And so I started doing it, and then he got tired of it and he left, and I just kept with it. And so I've really loved the opportunities and appreciate the opportunities I've been able to have in this industry. I'm very proud of the work I've done, and yeah, it's been an incredible journey in many different ways. Yeah.
Okay. So are you still active in showbiz right now, Sean? Just a quick follow-up to that.
Yes, in my own way. It's kind of interesting thing, but I'm doing more behind the camera stuff. So right now I'm developing projects, producing, doing a little bit of writing, and directing from time to time. I want to do more of that. I really have a passion for film and for art, and stories need to be told. Stories are one of the best ways to communicate. As we know, Christ in the Gospels almost always used at least pictures, right? At least analogies and visual aids with, you know, using words. So storytelling is incredibly important. Look at the parables. I think that's how, you know, you really reach people, because I can talk all day long and until someone's ears bleed, but it doesn't mean they're going to have a change of heart. But stories have the way of getting deeper into the heart without you realizing it. And so because it draws you in, and it's not a manipulative thing. It can be, but if it's truth, and we're always striving for truth, whether it's art or our lives or our words and everything in life, we should search for truth and preach truth. Then it's a wonderful thing, because it has the ability to impact us in a way that just normal everyday speech doesn't.
Wow, so sa ating mga viewers, narinig po natin ang mga shinare po ng ating guest na si Sean. That's an example of heart speaking to the heart when Jesus Christ used pictures or particularly day-to-day objects.
Parables.
Using parables, exactly. Kaya nga po tayo nagpapakita ng mga kwento ng convert so that we can see in a much easier and much better way what it means to be a Catholic and what do these people found in the Catholic faith. All right, so Sean, thank you very much for those wonderful insights. Moving on to the next picture, I saw this interesting picture which looked like a scene from an action movie. So can you tell us anything about this?
Oh, okay. So That is just it's just a photo shoot that I had done, but I wanted to get a military look. I always, when I was younger, part of me, I think it's every guy, but part of us wants to like be, I don't know, part of military, or I don't know, want to do something like that, be in the military. And so I think even still now, like it sounds like an interesting thing in some regard. Maybe not actually joining. I definitely appreciate the military and their service to our countries. But in the sense that we all want to do something important. We all want to do something that is, that tests our masculinity, our strength. Every guy has a question. Do I have what it takes? Am I really a man? And so I think that, that sometimes, we have that warrior heart inside of all of us. So one of my favorite books is called, Wild at Heart. And it talks about how deep within every man's soul is that question, are we really a man? Do we have what it takes to do what a man needs to do? And so I think that's why military movies and action movies are some of guys' favorites, right? We love action movies because we like to see men overcome in a very physical way. We're very physical we're human beings, and so those feats of whether it's strength or action or martial arts, whatever it may be, always kind of sets a fire inside a man's heart. We want to be able to defend ourselves, defend innocent people, our families. There's something in that speaks to us. So that's just a photo from a photo shoot I did with actually my cousin. He's a photographer, and so we wanted to do something that kind of looked more action like. And in the future, actually, we're working on a project that is that would be more related to. So I can't talk too much about it because it's in development, and the producers would strangle me if I said anything about it. But we're actually looking at producing it in the Philippines, and
Great.
so it's a TV
Great.
show we're going to be producing there, and then distributing it all over. So whether it's streaming or syndication to different networks. So we're excited about it. But that is, that's a photo. It's sort of a test photo in a sense for some of our upcoming projects. Yeah.
Okay, Sean, as we are about to wrap up the icebreaker part of the program, I'll show a couple of more photos, but you can try to talk briefly about them and let's see. Okay, this one.
Yes, our NBA fans might relate. Our viewers are
Yes,
NBA
for
fans.
those who are Filipino loves basketball.
I am a huge Kobe fan, and although he's flawed in many ways, and may he rest in peace. I was actually in the Philippines when I found out about it last year, and honestly, I was seriously moved by it because Kobe Bryant is in one way the quintessential picture of perseverance. Maybe even I wouldn't go as far to say that he's a saint, right? But his story is, and this is why I want to do it. I would love to direct this film, but his story is like, when you look at his whole life, lifespan, it's like the perfect picture of that quote that, every saint had a past, every sinner has a future, right? And then also the overcoming part of what it means to be, Catholic and a Christian. Because if you look at his story and you look at like the hero's journey, so to speak, the hero's journey, it's like you start in your status quo. And if you remember his story, if you guys are familiar, Kobe
Joseph
Bryant.
Campbell.
Yes, okay, Joseph Campbell, exactly. So if you remember though, Kobe Bryant's earliest years, the first time he went into a basketball league when he was, just I think in junior high or maybe even younger. You guys know how many points he scored?
How many?
No, I'm
Zero.
not familiar.
Zero in his first year. And he was so frustrated, which made me feel good actually hearing about that, because in my first season, I scored 1 point when I was younger. But here's the thing about so he scored 0 on his first year. And he was so frustrated and demoralized by that summer, he spent every waking moment that he had at the court, shooting, dribbling, doing drills, everything. And so you start from this demoralized state of, after having gone a whole season without making a single point. and that determination. It's such a it speaks so much, I think, to me and to so many others who have experienced just like failures and frustrations, and then the fact that he rises up and he really becomes what he's meant to become. He practiced so hard. Later on in his career, Phil Jackson said that nobody worked harder than Kobe, not even Michael Jordan. Nobody worked hard. He was always the first person in the gym and the last person out of the gym. And of course, we know, he works so hard and he enters the NBA, and you think everything's wonderful. But guess what? We don't realize, what a lot of people don't realize, is that for the first 2 years of his career, he was on the bench. But this is what he said later. And this is what they realized when they went back and talked to the other players, is that during practice, because he's so frustrated because he's looking at these other players who came to the league at the same time as him, he was so frustrated because these guys who came in at the same time, they're starters and he's on the bench. But he said if it wasn't for those 2 years on the bench and him just, frustrated again, he doesn't know where his career would be, because it was those 2 years practicing and just working on the gym that, he would go to practice and he would basically punish the whole team, and they made up nicknames for him, called him Hollywood, all this different stuff, because he would dribble through them all. And so he once that happened, then he would work on his long range so they can't talk about him that way. He said those 2 years were really, trial by fire in a sense. And so, of course, he becomes one of the best players in the league, if not the best player in the league. What happens? He falls into...
can't believe that those NBA stars seem to have similar stories. I think it kind of reminded me of Michael Jordan's story. So for our viewers, especially sa NBA basketball fans, makikita natin na si Kobe Bryant, ang isa pong NBA star na pumanaw last year, napaka-inspirational po pala niya, as what our guest Sean has stated. So I hope we can also learn from those things about Kobe. So anyway, Sean, I'm sorry, but we have to move on to the last picture.
Sure.
Okay.
I wanted to make one quick point, if that's all right, if that's okay.
Sure.
Go.
The last point is this. He fell into, obviously the scandals and whatnot. But when he realized during all that, there was one person that he realized he can talk to, and it was his Catholic priest.
Yes.
And so he realized that the most important thing to him was, of course, his family. He had to get his family back, and he did everything he could. And then, of course, he fell into breaking, his Akeelah's heel. He, tore that and everything else.
Right.
And so he had to go through all that humility. And then on the last game, what does he do? He doesn't get to do it one more time, almost like a God wing, 60 points. Interesting thing. The very last point is this: that on the day he died, that Sunday, he went to mass.
Yes.
Yes, I heard so.
Do you guys know what the psalm was that was on that day? The reading, the psalm.
What was
reading?
the song?
I think it was Psalm 24. I think it was Psalm 24. Psalm 24. I might be getting it wrong.
Was it the one with Lord's my shepherd? Something. Well, anyway.
It was.
Or the earth is the Lord's and everything in it.
It's the same one. It's tattooed on his shoulder. So literally the day he died, the psalm that is tattooed on his shoulder was the one read at mass. So it's a pretty interesting story. His story is like the quintessential hero's journey and redemption. It's pretty awesome. I don't know if he's a saint, but his story is a very inspiring one in that regard, because we all fall. And then he shows it. It's a perfect picture of how we got to get back up. Anyway, long story, but I love that story.
Sean.
Wow.
This is just the icebreaker, but we're already getting a lot of gems that we can use about the faith, right? Rodney, Sean is a full package right here. He's not just sharing about his story, he's sharing the stories of other people as well. And that's really awesome. And speaking of people,
I'll pay you the $50 later for saying that. Thank you for your
So speaking of people, everything Sean said, it reminds us of the quote, every saint has a past and every sinner has a future.
Exactly.
Maybe we can see that in Kobe Bryant's story as well. Anyway, Sean, going back, can you tell us something about this person or this your picture with this particular significant person in the church? This one.
Oh, yes. His eminence.
Yes.
Cardinal Tagle. It was a pleasure and an honor and a privilege to meet him at the Manila Cathedral. And we didn't get to talk too long, but it was definitely an experience meeting, a successor of the apostles. And I was very honored to do that. And so I want to thank the Manila Cathedral and all of our friends there who made that happen and allowed me to meet him. It's just it was a very profound moment for me. I definitely will never forget it. So it was great. It was great.
Amazing.
Great.
Yeah.
And that makes us very, very curious, Sean. You were very happy meeting a successor of the apostle in the person of a bishop and a cardinal, for that matter. That's Cardinal Tagle. And we all love him as Filipinos, right? But you were not always a Catholic. And that is something very, very interesting. Tell us about your faith journey. Like when you were younger, you grew up as a Protestant. And what type of Protestant were you, Sean?
Yeah, so I actually grew up Protestant. My grandparents were Catholic in the Philippines, but unfortunately, they left the Catholic Church in the Philippines and they became Baptist Protestants. And so growing up, when my grandparents moved here, my dad his family was also very anti-Catholic, Baptist sort of Protestant. And so growing up from both sides of the family, all I heard about the Catholic Church was negative things, very, very anti-Catholic rhetoric.
Like what?
And so,
Yeah.
Catholics worship the Pope. Catholics worship Mary. Catholics don't know how to get to heaven. Catholics don't read their Bibles. Catholics are going to hell. So I mean, there's Catholics, everything else under the sun that we hear in apologetics, whether it's like, oh, Catholics call priest father and Jesus said not to say that, everything else. And of course, it's misconceptions and lack of communication and so many other things we can talk about in a bit. But I grew up that way and very anti-Catholic rhetoric. And my brother, the interesting thing was this, though. This is something that was part of my conversion is growing up, though, when we were going to church, we would switch a lot of churches. We'd go from this church to this church. And it was always because my dad always found something wrong with the churches that we went to. Oh, I don't like what they're saying. I don't. Exactly. We're doing a lot of church hopping because he'd find something wrong with this church. We stay there for a little bit, maybe a week or 2 or 3 or a month. And then he'd find something that the pastor said. And he's like, oh, no, we're not going there because he's wrong. I'm like, oh, okay. And then we go from church to church to church to church to church. And like, it was so frustrating because it's like, well, who's right? There has to be somebody who has the most knowledge, has the full knowledge of the truth, has the correct interpretation, has the authority because they know the most and they read the most Greek. I don't know, whatever it is. And so I always stuck in my head, like, who's right? Someone's got to be right because you got Baptists and you got Lutherans and you got Anglicans and you have, Calvinists and you have everything under the sun, non-denominational, which is what I kind of went by for a while because it's like, I don't know. I'm going to go with the non-denominational one, which is kind of a denomination, right? Yeah. Because, everybody else, they can't figure it out. So I'm going to go with the most neutral, not blasé. I think it was actually like a lot of people there had, real passion for Christ. I'm not saying that about Protestants, but there's these differences that, all these different Protestant denominations. But the one thing they had in common was that the Catholics were wrong. Right. So that's the interesting part. So I always just thought the Catholics, that's one thing that I'm not going to accept. Maybe these other churches, but I got to figure out who's right.
Wow. Those things sound so familiar to us, especially for our former anti-Catholics like us, your very host. So for our viewers, narinig po natin ang sinabi ng ating guest na ang Katoliko daw sumasamba sa Santo Papa, tinatawag na Father ang pare, pero bawal sumasamba daw sa rebulto, kay Maria, sa mga santo. I think super familiar po yan sa atin sapagkat narinig din po natin yan sa ating past episodes at yan din po ang sinabi ng ating mga guests. Di ba, Sir Burns?
Yes, no? Kaya mga ka-Faith Watch, kung nakaka-relate kayo sa mga binanggit ni Sean ng mga misconceptions patungkol sa ating pananampalataya, comment kayo sa ating YouTube video, I can relate, para alam namin, no, na hindi kami nagdadalawa, no? Hindi kasi nag-iisa, nagdadalawa ni Rodney na nakaka-relate sa mga sinasabi ni Sean. By the way, Sean knows little Filipino. Feel free to show us your Filipino words later, Sean, as we go through your story.
But as you guys promised, you're going to give me a Tagalog lesson today, right? So
yes,
right, later.
Okay. That's the deal.
Yes.
I'm trying to learn konti lang, but
Konti lang.
yeah.
Pero sigurado kami magaling ka. That means we're sure you're good.
Sure, I would. Yeah.
Right. Now going back, okay, you said that you had those anti-Catholic faces. You believe in those things, that those common Catholic misconceptions by non-Catholics, and you had church hopping. Okay, those are interesting parts of the story. But can you share us very, very briefly, what actually made you decide to slowly convert to the Catholic faith? I mean, what were the first steps you took?
Really, the first thing is that my brother, like I said earlier, he's about 4.5, 5 years older than me. He went off to college and he studied abroad in Paris at La Sorbonne. And when he was there in Paris, he started studying, theology and the Catholic Church, especially since there's a lot of Catholic cathedrals in Paris. You got the Notre Dame and everything else, the Sacré-Cœur. And these amazing, beautiful cathedrals are sermons written in stone, as Peter Crave would put it. And so he, being very interested in why Catholics believe what they believe, especially since we grew up Protestant, his thought is, well, I should get to know what they think. Maybe I'll convert some to Protestantism, basically. And so in studying their theology over the course of, months and years, he began to realize that their theology and logic was actually much more sound and complete and cohesive than our Protestant upbringing. And so he got to a point where he realized, I think he started working abroad, and he was teaching ESL in different countries in Asia, and in studying different books and articles and listening to different podcasts and talks like this, he realized that the Catholic faith was true. The Catholic Church was the one true church, and he was totally convinced. And he told us that he was going to convert. And I thought he was crazy. I always thought he was totally nuts. And then over the course of a few months, my mom converted, and she listened to my brother, and I thought, okay, they're both nuts. So I took it upon myself because I'm
what
very
about
stubborn.
your dad?
Yeah.
Dad's still Protestant, so that's a whole other story as well. But so the interesting thing is this: Mom and Rob, my brother Rob, they converted, and so I took it upon myself to try to convert them back and prove them wrong, because I'm always the very stubborn one. My grandma would always say I'm very hard-headed, and so I took it upon myself to try to do this. And so every step of the way, where I tried to disprove him, debate my brother, go online, see where they're wrong, and then compare both sides, it began to be one by one, the arguments for the other side were making more sense to me, logically speaking. And so I instantly converted. No, I'm kidding. No, of course, what do we do when we do that? We have cognitive dissonance, and we're like, well, I'm just going to put that aside and kind of ignore that, right? Because we all want to do what we want to do. And so one thing, eventually I had to come face to face with it, but it was through a very interesting thing. So just to get a little personal and give you a little story, Sean,
you might want to share the whole detail in the next episode, which will be.
We'll do that.
But give us an overview of what you're about to share so that our viewers have something to expect. Go ahead. Okay.
So basically, I'll give you this. I got to this point where I realized I had to become Catholic, because the evidence for the one true church, Catholic Church, is overwhelming in favor, for our Catholic faith. When you look at history, when you look at the theology, when you look at scripture, it all points to it. There's so much in the Bible. There's so much in the Bible that points to the Catholic faith that, you never would realize. And then when you see it through the Catholic lens, it's like, oh my goodness, that verse never made sense before as a Protestant. it makes perfect sense, and everything comes together.
Amazing.
It's a bit like how I imagine it's like it's perfect, it's how I imagine heaven to be in a sense, right? Like we have all these frustrations here on earth, just like as
Right.
Frost, and all these frustrations, who's right, what's
Mhm.
going on, it's confusing. And then we get to heaven and goes, oh, that makes sense. That's what it's
Amazing.
like entering the
Amazing.
church. It's perfect. And you guys know Chronicles of Narnia?
Yes.
The Chronicles
Yes.
of
C.S.
Narnia.
Lewis.
So
Mhm.
C.S. Lewis I love C.S. Lewis. He's one of my favorite writers. But he wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And of course, I always give this analogy. The wardrobe, it's like you walk into the wardrobe, you're like thinking, okay, this is going to be like, an old, antiquated. That's how I saw the Catholic Church. That's how the Catholic Church is, this old, antiquated, outdated, paganish, with all these man-made traditions.
Right.
And so I'm like, all right, I'll check it out. And I look inside, I'm like, okay, wait a second. That's a tree. That's snow. There's a lamppost there. That's a mountain. Those are stars.
All those inside the closet.
That's why I saw the Catholic Church as this old, outdated thing. And as you walk into it, you see that there's a whole other world. It's the true world. And it's beautiful.
Wow.
It's beautiful.
Yes.
We're
Yeah.
gonna hold it right there, Rodney. And
Yes.
grabe, no? So, Rodney, before we wrap up, you wanted to say something?
Actually, all I want to say is it's so interesting because what Sean just told us, the Catholic Church is like taking you to a whole new world, whole different world. Maybe that's something that our viewers can stay tuned for. So abangan po natin
Right,
yan sa
definitely.
ating second episode. Let's wait for Sean, who will take us to a different world.
Yes. Let's just summarize, no, for our Filipino viewers sa mga sandaling ito, no. Bago po natin tapusin ang ating first episode with Sean, nabanggit po niya, katulad ng mga naging guest natin, na bilang isang anti-Catholic, marami din po siyang mga bagay na hindi naintindihan tungkol sa ating pananampalataya, impluwensya ng kanyang pamilyang kinalakihan. Inisip niya na ang Santo Papa ay ang Diablo, Antichrist, no? Inisip
Oo.
din niya na ang simbahang Katoliko ay pagano. At katulad ng maraming even Catholics, no, tayong mga Katoliko, minsan nakikita natin ang ating pananampalataya bilang isang luma at walang buhay na bagay, antiquated
Outdated.
and lifeless.
Mm.
Ngunit napakaganda ng tunay na mundong ipinapakita sa atin ng pananampalatayang Katoliko. It's beautiful, sabi nga ni Sean. Gaanong kaganda at gaanong katotoo ang mundong ito, abangan niyo po sa ating susunod na kabanata kasama si Sean Afable. Maraming pong salamat sa pagtutok sa ating CBCP Faith Watch. Heart Speaks to Heart. Ako po si Burns O. Kaasi.
At ako po si Rods De Leon, ang inyo pong co-host. And stay tuned for our episode. Continue supporting us and God bless.